Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sincerely Agile with Mary. If you're joining us for the first time, we stream on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and hopefully, we will be streaming on Instagram as well today. And this is a platform where we talk about everything to do with professional development, personal development, the growth mindset, and above all, it is a place where we want to be awesome and wholesome together. My name is Mary Lanio, and as always, I am your host. Today, we're looking at deliver better results. That is our topic, deliver better results. And as a matter of fact, we have an author with us today in the name of Gil Broza, who has actually written a book in the name of Deliver Better Results. So I'm just going to welcome Gil to the podcast. Hello, Gil. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. It's great to be here again.
It is great to be here again, absolutely. And this time you have written yet another book. And I can't wait for us to talk all about it. And the title of your book, beg your pardon, is Deliver Better Results, which is also the topic of our conversation today. Now, as you know, Gil, we stream on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and we often have live audience, and sometimes they will have their own questions. And as a matter of fact, I already have Ronke join us here today. And I really am hoping that we are streaming on Instagram. Hopefully someone can tell me if we're streaming on Instagram, because it will really be nice to get this to a wider audience. However, let me read out your bio so that our audience can get to know you again. So Gil Broza specializes in helping tech leaders deliver far better results by upgrading their organization's agile ways of working. He also supports their non-software colleagues in creating real business agility in their teams. He has helped over 100 organizations achieve real sustainable improvements by working with their unique value delivery context and focusing on mindset, culture, and leadership. Companies also invite him for specialized support, such as strategic mapping of their improvement journey, facilitation of organizational mindset workshops, and keynotes for internal conferences. He is the author of 4 highly acclaimed books, namely Deliver Better Results, The Agile Mindset, The Human Side of Agile, and The Agile for Non-Software Teams. He lives in Toronto. You are welcome to Sincerely Agile with Mary Gil.
So good to be back.
It is good to have you again. Now, this is your 4th book, right?
Yes.
So my first question to you, to be honest, is this. What drives you to write? Because this is not a walk in the park. It is no small feat. So what drives you? I haven't even written a book. So to have someone in front of me who's written 4 books, I need to know what drives you.
What drives me? So I have a mission statement in my company. The company is largely myself, right? My mission statement is to help knowledge work organizations do more of the right and less of the wrong. For over 2 decades, the primary means of achieving that was Agile. It continues to be Agile. There is still lots of interest in Agile, genuine interest that is picking up and trying to fix things. It's still there. We're going to talk about the state of Agile. But there are many, many other companies in the world that are developing products for people like you and me and like all of our audience. And those companies are not doing the best they could. They have lots of super smart people, busy people, well-meaning people who are building products and solutions, but the environment is not necessarily always that healthy. The performance is not always that great. The interactions, the relationships, they might be a bit tense. The business results are maybe not necessarily there. And I want to help them. And the primary way I make a living is through services, but realistically, not every company is going to hire me. I've had the privilege of working with over 100, but there are millions.
Yeah.
How can I reach them? Writing.
I totally agree. And especially when you have that conviction in terms of what you have to offer. We talk about, even within an organizational context, we talk about documenting, right? Document,
Yes.
document, document. So I guess the same goes for us, practitioners, where we have a conviction that, you know what, this is a knowledge I can share to a much wider audience. Then it makes sense to actually codify that into a book. So yeah, I think I like the rationale behind your reason for writing, and you have written great books. I mean, the one you wrote for non-software teams, I think that was such a great one. That was my first encounter of
Mhm.
your book, and it was a really good one. So thank you for that. Let's talk about this, which I believe is quite important. Um, we both work in the agile space. You longer than I have. And for me, I think I said this on one of my podcasts previously that if anyone had asked me 10 years ago, what does agile mean? I mean, I would give the classic dictionary, definition of, agile being adaptability, flexibility, responsiveness,
Mhm.
and all of that. And I don't think that will change for any organization. Okay. This was before I came to realize Agile in the context of Agile Manifesto and all of that.
Mhm.
So I don't think personally that there will ever be a time when an organization doesn't have to be adaptable or flexible or responsive.
Mhm.
So, what is all the, should I say, conversations going on about some people thinking, oh, agile is dead, some people thinking otherwise. Tell us give us your perspective.
Okay, and I'll make this brief because I'm sure we have listeners who've heard all of this stuff before and have had enough of the conversation. But
Exactly.
yes, so I think the problem people have is with capital A Agile, which does not have a single definition. The way I define it, and you know what, I'm pretty sure we even talked about this last time when we talked about Agile for non-software teams. I define big A Agile as any way of working that is consistent with the spirit of the Agile Manifesto. Meaning what? Meaning that it's a way of working whereby the value delivery system, which we'll talk about later, like everybody who participates in the making of the thing, is people first, adaptive, collaborative, customer centric. So big A Agile is, first off, it's not just the implementation, the standing up, the 15 minutes, the backlogs, the Jira. It's not that. It's the choices that we make in doing our work. And the other thing that's happening here is that it's a complete package. So every company has some interest in being adaptive. Every company has some interest in being customer centric. Fewer, unfortunately, have interest in being people first. What's special about Agile, again, the capital A Agile, is that it takes all of these things and puts them together because they're mutually reinforcing. We put people first and we act collaboratively and we put our customers ahead of our process and all of those things, and we get some magic. Now, has the world gotten the memo on that? No. Have a lot of companies gotten the memo on that? I think so. So in terms of the technology adoption curve, I think we are in late majority. I think a lot of the interest is in fact here to stay. I think that there are many, many organizations that are in fact seeing value in acting this way. And I want to emphasize once more, acting this way does not mean reciting answers to 3 questions, and it does not mean user story templates, and it does not mean a template for your unit tests. It's not about that. It's about the choices that we make as we rally a whole bunch of people doing really hard, never repeating complex work on behalf of other people. That, I think, will continue to be a competitive advantage for a lot of companies. Others might come up with their own thing, which might even look similar. Other companies might need some sort of a hybrid. And even there, hybrid does not mean that you mix and match practices from different places. It means that you intentionally design what you want your system to optimize for, and that might be a combination of things, but they're super high level. They're strategic choices. Keeping a backlog as opposed to a work breakdown structure, that is not a strategic choice. It's a tactical choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I like the words that you mentioned here. You talked about a complex adaptive system. You talked about being intentional. You talked about people. So
Yes.
there's very little that we can pre-plan, as it were, in this environment. There's a lot of emergence that we have to work with.
Yes.
And if we're going to be working with emergence, then a lot of awareness of our systems, sensing what is going on around us and being people first. But the one thing I would mention at this point is this. We have moved away from relative stability, like you already said. It's a very complex environment. And there's a lot of pressure on leadership to deliver. Okay.
Yes.
Now, having that pressure to deliver and taking the time to really be system focused, if you like, to say, how can we work with emergence here, as opposed to, going boom, boom, boom and trying to execute and, having, should I even say, executing in ambiguity, if you like, which we tend to see as well. So I think this takes me into, this is a good segue into the next question, which is, I'll just highlight that. What might be your one key message for leaders to improve business agility success rate? Because we see this time and time again. They want agility. They want responsiveness. They want, quality delivery. But how? Are they very clear on the how?
Okay. So I'll say what my key message is, and then we'll unpack it. Okay. What I want our listeners to do is understand this. You want to improve the fitness for purpose of your way of working, not to just plug holes or just try harder or look for efficiencies. The way to succeed in improving the fitness for purpose of your way of working is when you focus on your system, you act with an intentional and explicit mindset, and you put people first. These are the three preconditions that are necessary for any improvements to your business agility, to your way of working, to your operational model, for them to be successful. Now let's unpack this. I mentioned fitness for purpose. This is not a term that people normally use in conversation. Consultants do, coaches do, the Kanban world does, but it's not a common term. Usually when we think about it in the context of a product, right? For instance, now I'm using a special microphone to go on the podcast so that I have really good sound. Is the microphone and how it's set up fit for the purpose that I have it? Okay. Does my voice come through clearly? Does it pick up things it doesn't need to pick? Lots of product questions. I'm taking this concept and applying it to how we get stuff out the door, all the way from idea to delivery. When I say idea, it might be literally an idea for a feature or a project or a product. It could be a requirement. It could be an initiative. It could be an item on a roadmap. All the work that happens from that point to the time somebody benefits from it, which we might call delivery, all of that stuff happens in the system. That's a whole bunch of people, their management, everybody who has a say about what's going to happen and how they work. So it's people and process. And now we're asking, well, this big construct, the people and how they work, is that fit for purpose? So the stuff that's coming out, is it coming out when we need it to? Are we consistent about it? Are we as adaptable as we need to be? And a few more questions, which we'll touch on later. So if we want to deliver better results, specifically, let's say by increasing our business agility, then we need to work on this system. And we want to make it more fit for its purpose. Now, I mentioned that there are 3 conditions for that. We already talked about a couple, which is putting people first, and we talked about the mindset. But then there is also the matter of simply focusing our improvements on that system. And this is what is not happening nearly enough in organizations.
Improving the system itself.
Exactly, as opposed to improving locally. For instance, I'm sure we have listeners who are in charge of managers. We call them directors, right? Or they're more senior than that. Or they're program managers, project managers. They have accountability, they have authority, they have power, call it what you want. What I'm saying is, if you want to see better results, you need to look beyond the immediate scope that you're in charge of, or beyond the few people who report to you. Why? Because system. Because when those people who do report to you make a decision, a product impacting decision, for instance, prioritization, right? Or we're going to test this, but we're not going to test that. Or maybe it's a process decision, such as, from now on, I want your user stories to look like this. Whatever. Every decision they make has ramifications beyond your scope. That's because we have all sorts of cause and effect relationships in the system. And for instance, if you change the format of a user story, or you come up with a checklist that says, well, I need every story to have this, and this, there's going to be effects.
Yeah.
Some people will rebel. Some people will say, oh, yes, aye, sir, we're going to do just that. And before you know it, every story becomes huge. What can happen as a result of that? They take longer to materialize. We're less likely to split them. We're less likely to create new stories opportunistically because of the administrative hassle. I've heard this as a coach a million times. You get all sorts of effects. And then people, another effect could be people saying, well, yes, you put in all those details. I need some more. And I need some more. And let me add one more item to the checklist because there's already a growing checklist. What's one more? And before you know it, you have a spec, or you have a feature request the traditional way. And that's going to hurt your agility. And the crazy thing is, the person who wanted the better checklist for the user story totally meant well. Everybody means well. It's not that people are just, crazy for process and we got to have process everywhere. That's not the case. People mean well. They want to be more successful. But if they don't think of the potential effects to what's happening here, or they don't work with their colleagues on, let's come up with a decision that helps all of us and not just me, and on, then you get all of those crazy effects. And ultimately, you don't get a better result. You get a slightly tweaked system that could actually be worse off.
Yeah.
But you meant well.
Yeah. What I hear you say here is, how can we break through those silos where we're not just optimizing locally, right? Yes. We need to optimize the full system. And I was thinking in my mind, what is the role of big room planning here to ensure that we're planning together, we are aligned, and we can prioritize together?
So big room planning is great for that. But big room planning is usually focused on the work. What features or whatnot are we going to build? And maybe how we'll deliver them, and on and on. You got to have this. This is basic management of work. What we're focusing on today is a little different. You can think of it as big room planning for our process. Now, in Agile, we have retrospectives and we have teams looking after themselves. That can also be harmful because a team is generally just a small subset of the system. And I have seen this plenty, where one team will optimize for themselves at the expense of other teams.
Yeah.
For instance, by grabbing all those people who are hard to get, right? Or they want their process to look like so, not like anybody else's. And now you have coordination issues. So what we want to work with is this construct of the system. That's what the leaders ought to be focusing on if they want the results of the system, which is practically the product we make a living off of, to be better.
Right. So we need to take a wider view of the system, and look at all the component parts or all the teams that comes within the system to deliver value. So what I'm thinking here now is value stream. Is that correct?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So value streams done right pretty much correspond to the concept that I'm talking about in terms of the scope. The issue I have with value streams, and it's really based not just on a linguistic sensitivity, but also what I've seen happen, is the concept of the value stream connotes that work goes through activities and through stages. It goes downstream, right? And every team has somebody upstream from them, which is very much like the thinking we had back in waterfall. First people do this, and then they do that, and then other people do that. Now, largely, work does follow those stages, right? But not entirely. And like I was saying, decisions made at any point in there will have ramifications elsewhere, and those ramifications will not be obvious and visible from a process map. So if you have a value stream that's composed of different functions basically handing stuff off to each other and not really seeing the bigger picture of how do we work together so that we have a good end result, then you will have the local optimization, you will have the delays and whatnot, but not just in the flow of work. You will also have all sorts of funny bugs and upset people and escalations and a whole bunch of things that shouldn't be, but they're a result of managing locally. And by the way, when I say managing locally, some of it is due to the hierarchy. I don't expect the hierarchy to go away. There's a lot of good sense in having a hierarchy. But even in a hierarchy, we want managers, directors, and whoever to work with their colleagues within the system so they make choices that benefit everybody. And, in the successful companies, that's what they do. I mean, for instance, some basic example is the triad model, right? So instead of having one PO be the king of the universe, no, you have three people, right? And it kind of varies, but it can be, product and design and engineering or something similar to that. They make decisions together. What I'm saying in the book is not so much how do you make decisions that produce necessarily a better product, but how do you decide about how you work so that on a more consistent basis you turn out better products.
Right. So talking about how you work,
Yes.
I think we can backtrack a little bit here, which again, sometimes we find in the trenches that when organizations are under so much pressure, they just want to hit the ground running. They feel all these conversations about, should I say the soft side of things? Because I like to see it as, the hard stuff. It's just like having a computer hardware and the software. You do need both, right?
Yes.
For the, for things to work properly. So, but sometimes, like I said before, because they are in so much hurry to deliver, we tend not to pay attention to the soft side of things, and that includes how do we want to work together. So if we're looking at the team, for example, at the team level, a team alliance, If we're looking at a network of teams, or I don't know, a department, or a department and another department, how do we want to work together in terms of forming an alliance? How do we want to manage our boundaries, our stakeholder
Hmm.
management, and all of that?
Yeah,
I feel we need to spend enough time articulating that, so that we truly intentionally create a way of working that is obviously not cast in stone, because
hmm,
we're working in a very
of course.
imagined environment. We will from time to time go back to see if the alliance is serving us or not, but at least we have a starting point, and we imprint in our minds the fact that we need to be careful to avoid local optimization. So if I want to make any change, I can't afford to have that tunnel vision of what this means for me in my department, but I need to understand that bigger picture, and how whatever change I want to make affects, the other people involved.
Absolutely. Look, I have seen this play out in so many different ways. I have seen, teams, programs where you have to deliver, you have to deliver. And the way some of the managers took that is rush, rush, rush. Make sure the teams have something to do because I need my resources, air quotes, busy.
Yeah.
At least deliver something. That doesn't always turn out so well, right? Because busyness doesn't correspond to value and
Value.
and revenue and success and goodwill. But I've also seen situations where people said, yes, no, we do need to kind of hurry up here. Can we just pause and think a little bit about this? Can we talk to each other? And somehow they made it happen. Now, here's something that I find troubling. And it sort of goes back to the state of Agile. Every organization, when you look at them, they have a way of working. Usually it's not perfect or optimal for their situation. Well, that's fine because it's a complex moving target, fine. But what will often happen is that that way of working is really not particularly fit for purpose. And they kind of stay with it that way. So you have the organization spending 8-9 figures on people and all the resources that they use and the vendors and the whatnot, and the organization is not getting the ROI out of that. Not nearly as much as they should. So what does
How
it
do you
take?
convince the leaders to pause? Because let me remind you, at the peak of COVID, right? From India, we could see was it the Himalayas or something? We could
I
see
remember, yeah, when the smog cleared, yes.
when the fog cleared, and that was because everybody was on lockdown. We were not polluting the environment. For a short period of time, we could see it. And when I think of that, I'm thinking about the system. Also,
Mm-hmm.
I'm using this as an analogy now, is perhaps if they will just pause for a minute, then they can see how the system in which they are working right now is counterproductive. And that just might encourage them to, like you said, do something about it. Otherwise, we are putting in all these resources, we're working really hard, but
Yeah.
we're not getting the value that we deserve.
Which actually brings us to, so how do you know if the system's doing well or not?
That
Right?
is how you assess it.
Yes. So, which is like asking, okay, so how fit for purpose is the system? Right? And when I started thinking about this question 3 years ago ish, because before that, every client I had was squarely in the Agile space, right? They wanted to know that they're getting the best out of Agile, that their Agile way of working was fit for them, and that's lovely. But then I started working with more companies that didn't care for the label. For companies that, by and large, do similar work, have similar problems, but they don't think of their way of working as Agile. It's like, you can look at so many tech companies and they'll do the dailies, they'll do Jira, they'll do stories, they'll do sprints, but, they're allergic to calling them Scrum. No, of course, if it really was Scrum, then you'd have a few more things come along, that not just these visible tactics, but fine. So I was wondering, how can we determine easily that a system is in fact fit for purpose. And of course, it's not a binary question. It's not an is or isn't. It's a spectrum. And I looked around to see what would other people do. I actually asked a bunch of people, like directors or VPs, and said, okay, so if you wanted to describe it or you wanted to make it better, what would you do? And I normally got a deer in the headlights look. So people can generally sense when things are not great or that they are okay, but it was really hard for them to somehow quantify it, even in a very qualitative way. What I did find is that most of the assessments out there have to do with compliance. Compliance to Scrum, compliance to SAFe, compliance to something. Do you meet frequently, right? And do you keep your stories small? And all of those things that presuppose that you're doing the Agile dance. But what if you're not? What if that's not what you're trying to do? The conclusion that I drew from this is that if we want to understand system fitness, we have to look at the effects the system has on the company. Or put another way, which is actually how I define fitness for purpose, it's, to what extent does it help the company achieve its mission and objectives? And having quick daily meetings does not answer that. It answers other things. So I came up with a few aspects. If your system has such and such throughput relative to your context, not to Google, not to Facebook, relative to your needs and context, if the system solves user problems and business problems, if the recipients of the product get it when it's still timely, if the system and its product are as adaptable as you need them to be, if you're consistent about all of that, if you're cost efficient about all of that, then we can say, yeah, it's fit for purpose.
Can we also say that it is therefore important that we know exactly what we want to measure?
So here's the thing. I have yet to find a single organization that has all the right metrics, done right, not played with, collected reliably, and that they actually reflect all of those aspects. So, for instance, we can look at DORA metrics, right? DORA metrics have nothing to do with, are your users happy or not? Well, if you never ship anything, yeah, your users are not going to be happy, fine, but who cares about that situation? You ship frequently, okay? You recover quickly, okay, fine. But is your product of interest? Do you finish features, not just put stuff in production, but do you finish features in a timely fashion from their standpoint? The metrics don't tell us that. And that's why the assessment I came up with actually doesn't take metrics. It's subjective. It is very much from a person's point of view. That's why it's particularly great if several leaders do it at the same time and just compare notes. But because of that, it only takes 10 minutes.
Yeah, because they can tell. If they're the ones working in the system.
Yeah, they can tell, exactly.
If it's a painful system, they would know.
Yes, exactly. So I came up with this assessment. It is meant to be easy and quick, not perfect, because there is no perfect anyway. What we need is good enough so that we can tell if we now did X, Y, and Z, that will make us better. That's the whole point of it. Not to say, well, hey, I got a 3. What did you get? No, we don't care for that. We want a way to assess that fitness so we can have meaningful conversations. If you think about those 6 aspects that I mentioned, they're suitable whether you do waterfall, Scrum, SAFe, Kanban, Lean, whatever. And you can also talk with stakeholders. You can talk with your executives without, boring them to death with process and tools, which they don't care for. But if they tell you, look, you're always late, that's already a pretty good indication of your fitness for purpose. Now, maybe they tell you they're always late because they hate your guts. But if the conversation is real and it's based on actual observable fact, fine.
So the next question is, what do we do about it?
Yes. So the way this model works, the model in the book that's called Square, is we look at those 6 aspects. We understand where fitness is right now. So we go for each of the 6 aspects. There's basically a couple of prompts that we go through, questions really. Again, the whole thing takes 10 minutes. It comes out with a number. And the number is your level of fitness. Ranges from 1 to 5. 1 largely corresponds to, we got problems here. We got big problems here. And 5 is like,
and you need to call Houston.
Yes. And 5 is like, okay, we're awesome. All of this, again, is relative and contextual, right? So you can have a system that, if you showed it to, I don't know, again, Google, they might say, that doesn't look terribly productive for me or to me or something like that. But if it's just right for you, that's all you need. Okay? You don't need to be the same as any industry giant.
Yeah.
If you do need to be like that, well, your yardstick is that long, right? And so,
which some assessment tools try to do. They try to look at, industry standards and for you to measure yourself against that.
Yes. And we can't have this because those standards are elusive. And again, they only look at or some parts of the picture. Okay, so I understand your level. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What the model also says is to get from one level to the next, you need to execute 2 or 3 strategies. The book explains all of them. There's a total of 10. So there's like 2 or 3 per level. But what's important to understand is that they are sequential and incremental. So the sequence I just mentioned, but also the incremental nature is that, let's say you're at level 3 right now. In order for your 3 to even be sustainable, let alone improve upon it, to be sustainable, you need the strategies from levels 1 and 2 to be in place.
And to be working.
To be working, to be part of the furniture.
Yeah.
And not that, you did them once as a one-off thing, but no, you're now regularly doing those things. So, for instance, one of the 2 strategies for going from level 2 to 3 is to make sure that every decision has a home. That when we need to make decisions about the product or the process, but usually about the product, we know who makes them and how. Now, maybe it's not that we make them perfectly, but they don't just dissipate. They don't just kind of get lost because nobody knew what to do. We know who makes them.
It is owned and it is tracked.
And we know that maybe it's this person who makes it, or maybe it's this group and they make it with consensus, or it's that group and they make it by, the leader deciding and getting buy-in, whatever. But the decision has a home, meaning that we're always in a position of making progress and not just saying, well, okay, so what do we do now? So making sure that every decision has a home is something that you can kind of do in a concentrated effort. I actually have a client that's doing that this month. But you need to still be doing this. For instance, let's say that you've done this and in 6 months, you've grown 20%. You have lots more people. You have more managers now. You do more work.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, there will be gaps in decision-making. Make sure you plug them. So that's an example of, keeping that strategy alive.
Yeah. As you were talking, Gil, I was thinking of objectives and key results as well. And I was just asking myself, can we not achieve the same with OKRs?
Well, OKRs generally have to do with what we want to achieve from the product standpoint, although you can also use them to say, what do we want to achieve from our process standpoint?
Yeah.
Of course. So you can have an OKR around, we want to make this much improvement, but we're following the guidance and the model. So it's not like improve 10%, whatever that means. No, maybe at the beginning of the quarter, we've assessed ourselves as like, low level 3. By the end of the quarter, we want to get to mid level 3. And here's how we would know key results. Sure, of course you can do that. The big deal is that there are people in the system. It's usually a team, not an agile team, but just a bunch of people who share responsibility, and they look after the system. They look after its health, after its well-being, progression, that it doesn't bounce back. In some organizations, that's not a team; it's a single individual, like a director of Agile or a maybe head of NGOps or something like that. It doesn't matter. The point is that it has a home. People who pay consistent attention to it. Maybe that's their OKRs. It's fine.
What I'm also thinking as you're talking is I'm thinking psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking team coaching. I'm
Yes.
thinking systemic coaching. All these
Yes.
thoughts are just coming into my head from all directions, and how all those dots need to connect for us to have a system that is functioning well, or a high-performing team, or a high-performing department, if you like. Because at the end of the day, whatever it is we're doing, I feel that psychological safety sets the foundation for that. So if we want to do this assessment, it doesn't matter whether it's a square assessment, it doesn't matter whether it's a conversation about OKRs. If people don't feel safe, they still won't, come through in the way that they ought to. So just not to, I don't want us to send a message out there that if you use square, you are all good, if you see what I'm trying to say, because there is no silver bullet for anything, as we all know. So what's your take on that? The systemic, aspect of things, not just about, okay, we have this square system, we can do things from different levels. How can we bring this systemic into it? Because we're dealing with people here, right? There's a lot of undercurrent issues.
Yes.
That never surface. How can we make sure that in the process of using Square, we are going beneath the surface?
Okay. So this is definitely a key element of the model. I just haven't talked about it yet, but it's actually in one of the earlier chapters in the book. If all you see is the system as the collection of its processes, then you're absolutely right. The people issues will trump your progress.
Yeah.
To me, change starts with people. I wouldn't have written the human side of Agile otherwise, right? So in order to execute any of these, you need a leadership foundation. So in the book, I describe what I consider like the minimum viable foundation for how leaders in a system show up and behave so that those improvements, that they stick, that they actually make a difference, they stick, and the system is legitimately and sustainably better for them. You mentioned safety. Safety is just one thing. But even then, I don't expect safety to be dialed to the max before you get started with anything. And in fact, as I was writing the book, I discovered something really nice. So there's this model of 4 levels of safety from Timothy Clark, and it corresponds really neatly to the levels.
Yeah.
I mean, I was not force-fitting anything. It really worked super cleanly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for instance, the big safety that everybody talks about in the Agile space is actually the 3rd level, which is contributor safety. This safety that allows me to be like a bona fide member of the team, make mistakes and all that. But there are 2 preceding levels of safety. There is inclusion and there is learner. And if things are like really, really bad, we're level 1, we're not going to be creating contributor safety anytime soon.
No.
However, to get to level 2, at least we need inclusion safety. So people should at least understand that everybody treats them as legitimate partners. Maybe it's still not cool to make mistakes. We'll take care of that. But for now, at least be part of us. Okay, and then it goes on to learner safety. So like at level 2, if you want to level up from that to 3, now is the time to deal with learner safety, right? So at least give people time to make sure that they know what to do and how to do it.
Yeah.
But there are many other aspects of our humanity that are critical for executing on those improvements. For instance, people need to be ready, willing, and able. Okay? When leaders talk to others, talk to teams, they should really be mindful of the words that they use, because the words communicate all sorts of assumptions and models that may not produce the results that the leaders want. Okay, assuming that there is fear. There's a whole bunch more that has to do with, again, how a leader engages so that improvements can have a chance of working out. Now, again, it doesn't mean that the organization first needs to transform into absolute 100% servant leadership, rainbows and unicorns. It's not going to be like that. And it's not touchy-feely either.
Yeah.
But it is important for the leaders to know how to show up so that, again, their improvement initiatives have a chance.
Yeah, and then talking about leadership, I think we often hear that it is lonely at the top, right? I think
it is.
We need to have that team approach. I mean, as a leader, am I also looking at myself as, the boss at the top, or am I seeing myself as the member of a team? If you see where I mean, where we are collectively able to. I mean, obviously, the final accountability lies with the heads. We all know that. But
Yeah.
am I actually a team player? And have I been present enough to create that safe space? And have we been able to articulate how we want to work together so that all of these things you're talking about can then happen? Because like you said, we're not going to get, to a place of safety overnight. It's an iterative process. It's a process that will evolve, and we have to constantly go back to our alliance to say, is this serving us? What needs to change? What do we want to take out? What do we want to add, and stuff like that?
Yes, absolutely. Look, the biggest thing for leaders, and we've said this a million times, is self-awareness.
Yeah.
Right? So self-awareness has to do with understanding how they show up and the effects they have on people, the effect they have on their bosses, on everybody else, understanding their blind spots, hang-ups, issues, associations. Okay. But there are additional things that a leader needs to know before this specific topic of improving the system can be successful. So I mentioned those in the book. So one is even understanding systems.
Yeah.
What's the big deal, as opposed to, well, we just hand stuff off to the next group. What's the problem, right? There's that. Understanding that the way of working is not just the tactics, it's also the mindset, and the mindset actually matters tons more, right? The significance of language. There's a whole bunch.
Absolutely. Thank you. And to be honest, you've sort of covered my next question to a great extent. I said you seem to be advocating for systems thinking in your book. Tell us more about that. Is there anything else you want to say about systems thinking?
I was exposed to system thinking, 15 years ago. Usually in the form of really, really big, busy diagrams with arrows and this and that and the other thing. And that never sank in for me. I mean, across all my years as a coach, trainer, and whatnot, I have produced very few of those diagrams. But what I did instead is talk to people and maybe sketch something on a whiteboard, maybe. But talk to people about, okay, so this happened. What was the effect? And what happened as a result, right? That's the extent of systems thinking that we're looking for here. And there's also another aspect to this, saying, well, if one thing leads to another, right, the chain of causal relationships, then some of them come back. And those are simply loops. Everybody in the world of technology development understands loops and cycles. They understand vicious cycles. They hope for more virtuous cycles. We'd like to have more of those. But knowing that they're there and just being cognizant of the loops in your particular system is going to be super important. Okay. And the loops, by and large, and I think that's okay. I'm thinking that one reason this was not entirely sitting well with me is that the causal loop diagrams and everything else was very much about, okay, so we have more bugs, and then we have more QA and more upset customers. It's all mechanical. But a lot of the loops in your system are simply because of the decisions people make. So if you have a tester who normally spends 8 days regression testing something, but today spent only 2, and the product went out and there was an outage, map that. So the tester decided to test less. How come? That's a root cause analysis. But if we also look at the results, now we can start seeing the loops here. So if we think of the system as basically a whole bunch of decisions being made and impacting others, we'll know where to intervene. And yes, you can draw diagrams that might be very helpful because visualize, right? But it's that simple. We just need the awareness.
I totally agree with you there, and I like the fact that you said it's not about the diagrams, it's not about the processes. Even the Agile Manifesto did say individuals and interactions over processes and tools, right?
Which is a system thinking statement, right?
It is.
Totally.
It is totally a systems thinking statement, and it's about Gemba walk, if you like. Go and see, go and talk to people, create an environment where we can very quickly attend to these problems. If we go back to the Toyota way of working, right? We have the andon cord, right?
Yes.
As soon as there's a problem, we pull the andon cord, and everybody understands that we need to swarm this.
So right? that's a great way to respond to issues, right? You catch them, you stop the line, you swarm, great.
But it's a mindset is what I'm trying to extract from
that. Yes, it is totally a mindset. But what I want to add to the mix here is that I don't want you getting to great product development, great value delivery through a series of stop the lines.
Fair enough.
I don't want you just fixing problems. I want you, and that's a mindset change here, I want you to think about making the system healthier. And sometimes making the system healthier is as simple as who do you put together with in a team? Maybe they get along, maybe they don't get along. You would not see this from process.
No.
You would not see this from metrics. Like the collaboration or the flip side, avoidance. Yes, that's a sort of Gemba walk, which of course nowadays has become super difficult because of our online work. But you wouldn't know it if you just managed process. And if you were to just fix problems, you would not root cause the problems and to realize, oh, it's because those two people don't work well together.
Yeah. Which again takes some safety for that to emerge.
Yes.
Right? You might observe as a manager that two people are not exactly flowing well together. But for us to really get to the bottom of that problem, if you like, you also need a safe environment where these problems can really surface to the point where we can really fix the problem. So again, it brings us back to the sheer fact that we need to talk to one another. We need to create safe spaces. And I'm happy you brought up the 4 pillars of psychological safety, inclusion, learner safety, contributor safety. and the challenger safety.
Yeah.
And the thing about that, those layers, is that you can't achieve the next one without the one before, right? If
Yes. Yes.
exactly. So if I'm in a team or within an organization where I don't feel included, I can't even bear to show up and say and ask a question or say I don't know something or ask for help. So all of these things mount up once we don't have that inclusion safety. So at the end of the day, regardless of the model we're trying to use, I like the fact that you're bringing it back to the basics, communication. Let's talk to one another. Let's create an alliance. Let's go back to that alliance from time to time to see if it is working for us or not. What else?
Yeah, and really, I guess what I'm doing with the book is I'm not just saying, yeah, build this alliance and
Mhm.
work together frequently, but also giving people this roadmap of saying, generally, this is how systems improve. So it's
Yes.
not like you now say, okay, let's talk to one another. What should we do next?
Mm.
Maybe like in a retrospective where it's basically, hey, what needs improvement? And
Yeah.
we have no idea.
Yeah.
And so this is a bit of a happy medium between you should do this
Mhm.
super specific thing, like update your user story template, and general strategy of, oh, just make it better, improve the metric. No, this is a happy medium in terms of if you're here, you should probably think about these 2, 3 high
Yeah.
level things and
Yeah.
then take it from there.
Absolutely. It narrows it down to what will help you to be much more successful in terms of the strategies that you need to actually embrace for the next level, which
Yes.
is great.
Can we give something to our listeners?
Yeah.
I would like to give our listeners chapter 1. So chapter 1, as you've seen, is not an introduction. It is
It's full blown.
yes, it's full blown.
Yeah.
It's called the big picture.
Right.
The idea is to be a foundation for the rest of the book, but also to give you a bit of an executive summary.
Right.
One of the use cases for it is you read this book and say, my boss has to read this too, but your boss
Yes.
is busy and is not going to read it. Read just chapter 1. Any
So
boss can find 20 minutes. Chapter 1 should be enough for them. So
fantastic.
I made a page. It's called heardonpodcast.deliverbetterresultsbook.com. And you can just get the chapter from there.
Okay. So are you giving that to one person or
Well,
anyone can have it?
anyone can have it.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll put the link in the in the post so that anyone can actually get hold of that. So thank you very much for offering that to my audience. And we're coming to the top of the hour. This has been a great conversation. And just before we go, next week we have Veronica Safwa Wosu, and we're going to be talking navigating life, love, and work, because it will be Valentine's Day. So that is an interesting conversation to have. And thank you very much for the time investment here today, and for our audience both on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and now Instagram. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will be back again next Wednesday. Thank you very much, Gil. Thank you so much. It's
My
been a great
pleasure. Thank
conversation.
you.
Bye-bye.